Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you're on the advisory council, can you please put your name in the chat so that we have that for the record? And with that, I'll actually turn it over to Michael or Angie if they have anything to say, but anything else? We have a lot to talk about and want to get into the presentation as quickly as possible. Michael or Angie?
I think we're ready to go. I think it's a busy day. Let's make the thanks to everyone that have joined, and really appreciate the work that MDE is doing, putting all this together. Angie?
Yeah, let's get this party started.
All right, great. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about compostable products in the law and generally compostability. So as usual, here is our housekeeping statement. Please, as Bradley said, if you are part of the advisory council, just put your name and affiliation in the chat, and then please remain on mute so that there isn't any background noise as long as you're not talking, and use the raised hand function. And also public comment will be held for the last 10 minutes of the meeting. So our agenda for today is to go through a regulations update. Then there will be some presentations on compostable covered materials, an ensuing discussion, and then the public comment period will be opened. So we just wanted to give a quick update, let everyone know that the 30-day public comment period for our proposed draft regulations ended on March 9th. So we received a lot of comments, and we'll be reviewing those. And then about 50 comments were received, just to state that. And with that, I'm going to turn it right over to our first presenter. If Linda is on the call. Okay, I'll give it a couple more seconds here, Linda. I don't know if you're on the call, but if not, we can move ahead to our next presenter and maybe circle back around. Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Actually, Sarah, I just saw that Rhodes had submitted a revised presentation, so if you just want to unshare for a quick second, I will upload those real fast.
Perfect, sounds good.
And actually, Sarah, would you mind bringing up the information that Mel had provided last week?
Say that one more time, sorry.
Mel had resubmitted some information and questions, and just make sure you pose those up onto the screen real fast, please. Do you have them, Sarah? I'm so sorry. Are you aware of what I'm referring to?
I don't. I'm looking for them, but I am not seeing anything at the moment. So sorry. Still looking. Hi, Walter. Um, I am noting that you have your hand raised. Feel free to go ahead. I do want to let you know that there is a public comment period for those who are not on the advisory council at the end of this meeting. Okay. And sorry all for the delay. We will get going here in 1 second.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. It's in my pocket. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, it was a little hard to hear you, but it looks like you don't have your hand raised anymore. And then Shannon, if you want to give me a heads up as soon as the slides are ready to go, I'll reshare those. And I see that Linda, you are now on our call.
Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
Sarah, go ahead and represent them and I'll add his while she's presenting.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we are going to move forward with our first presenter from the US Composting Council.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, so yes, my name is Linda Norriswalt, and I'm Executive Director of the US Composting Council. And I previously, before becoming Executive Director, was actually working on policy and EPR. So I'm really excited to be here in my home state of Maryland. I live in Middletown, Maryland. So if anyone is from the central trending to west, hello. So we can go to the first slide. USCC, as I think most people on the call know, next slide, I'm sorry, I meant the first actual content slide. US Composting Council represents composters around the country, and we represent, I would say, most of the composters in Maryland, and we have 975 members at the moment, close to 1,000, but I would say about a little over half of our members are commercial composters who are either public, private, all scales of composting. And we have been working on EPR since about just before COVID, when we started hearing about EPR for packaging coming in Maine and Oregon. And we started watching that, and we're talking with, you'll be hearing presentation from Rhodes from BPI. We were talking with BPI about this as well, because this is something that is a benefit to all sides of the composting industry. Good extended producer responsibility programs benefit both of us, or all phases. Number one, it's incentives to design for compostability, which composters want. And we feel like extended producer responsibility is really important because for us at the beginning, we saw it as a tool to help us build infrastructure, which is what we've desperately been asked for by many states, including Maryland, for more access to compost facilities so that there could be more composting programs around the country. And it was also an issue of fairness, because if it didn't seem fair to us or to the entire industry spectrum to be levying fees on compostable packaging producers when there was no benefit to the industry in which their product was used. So that's why we really got into the EPR thing, and we watched the Maine and Oregon bills. Everything, this was all very new to us. We had started talking to the Stewardship Council, and we had talked to national, it's NCEL, which is legislators that work in EPR and in other environmental issues. And they just were not very interested in integrating composting into EPR. So we put together a task force between BPI and USCC, including our staff, including members, as you can see on the slide, from the compost industry, as well as the compostable products industry to come up with what we thought were joint reasons why we should be working on EPR together and how we might go about doing this. So this has been a process since 21 that we have been working on, and we have seen our goals moving more and more into the EPR bills that are out there, including Maryland's. Okay, so in terms of covered materials, and that's the topic today, I pulled out of our guidelines the issues that we felt were relevant, that I felt were relevant to today's discussion. And one of the issues is our guideline number 2. And actually the guidelines, I should have pointed out, the slide before had a QR code where you can see the guidelines. They're on both of our websites, BPI's and USCC's. Oops. Oh, this might not be my current slide. Sorry about that. I had updated it with QR code, but it doesn't look like it's there. So anyway, you can go back to it. You can find this in the USCC website and the BPI website. Thanks, Rhodes. He's posting it in the chat for you. But one of the ones that we all felt was really important, that all materials must be covered when it comes to compostable products. You know, not certain parts of compostables, not certain materials, not, you know, fiber versus bioplastics. It should cover everything when it comes to compostable materials as a class. Number 2, and this also comes from the compostable labeling guidelines, which I do have a slide about, but I'm not sure if it made it in here. But we also worked with BPI a couple of years later about compostable labeling guidelines. And in our guidelines for both EPR and compostable labeling, it is critical that the materials that are covered be associated with food. That is the reason why composters get involved with taking compostable packaging. They want to be able to get more sources of nitrogen into the stream to help with their recipes. So, you know, having compostable cell phone covers and things of that nature is not a great help to composters, number 1. And number 2, it will contribute to our biggest problem we have right now, which is contamination. Number 3, we wanted eco-modulation to be included, which there is an element of that in Maryland's EPR law and in other laws in various ways, that fees for certified compostable products should be tied to composting, number 1, not recycling, landfill, whatever, since that's what they are for. Again, as I mentioned earlier, these eco-modulation incentives encourage design for compostability and reward the products that are becoming certified, that are becoming field tested, that are accepted by composters to be rewarded for the effort that they're putting into making these products usable for composters. Next slide, please. Okay, well, there is one of my QR codes, so maybe I forgot the other one. Okay, so one thing I wanted to mention too is that since COVID, when we started working together, this has been one of the things that has really brought the compost industry and the compostable packaging industry much, much closer together than we ever were. We started listening to compostable packaging folks and hearing about their issues. They started listening and asking composters about what we need so that they could better design. So EPR has been a good tool for that. An example of that was a huge convening of about 150 people in Denver in 2024. That QR code talks about the project, which had many, many deliverables, but one of the ones that we wanted was a national EPR, so we could standardize EPR. And that still hasn't come about. You have to have EPR in a number of states to start to make that something that will move at the national level. Next slide, please. So the labeling law that I mentioned, or the labeling policies, so Maryland does have a labeling law. It's one of the earliest. And the US Composting Council's chapter, the Maryland DC Composting Council, has been talking about working with someone in, originally, I think there was discussion for this session, but it'll probably be more likely next session, where we would like to update the labeling bill to address some of the advances, or the labeling regulations with a new bill to align with some of the advances that have been made in other states like Colorado, Washington, and Minnesota. And some of the main ones that we need to see to work in tandem with EPR so that this is successful is penalties for greenwashing and for for outright intentional greenwashing and for non-compliant products. For example, in some states, you can't use the colors that are assigned to compostables so that people aren't confused, and you would have a fine if you do. And a reporting portal for greenwashing, which they've done with great success in Colorado. Adherence to third-party standards, ASTM standards, which is part of our guidelines, food scrap products only, as I mentioned, and really, really critical for both EPR and for labeling is money for education, for labeling identification. Next slide, please. So just a couple other observations I wanted to leave with before I go that have come up to us as composters, and I'm sure that Rhodes will have some from the national view of compostable packaging, but things that when we originally did our guidelines, as EPR laws have evolved and this affects covered materials, things that might need to be considered. So one thing is tying covered materials that are defined as certified compostable, which is what this group is working on, to available acceptance. And Maryland does have some general language. Other states, you probably want to look at other states because they had more specific language about the percentage of the state that has to have access to composting. We're very lucky in Maryland because we do have a lot of access to composting in Maryland. So we would generally meet those meet that criteria as long as all those composters continue to accept compostable packaging. And a lot of states are setting a actual cadence for when those updates are made, because there's a lot of R&D going on with compostable packaging, a lot of R&D going on with field testing, and we're always advancing, seeing new materials that composters who accept packaging are willing to accept. Eco-modulation, considering that constant R&D and the constant field testing, funding for education. This really should be incentivized with funds that come out of EPR. Composters are really wanting to see education happen at the generator level. We don't want to be the ones who have to educate people when it gets to our gate. And lastly, putting more money towards funding infrastructure growth. That helps everyone, whether it's composters or those who are producing compostable packaging, to have more infrastructure. So grant programs, I know Maryland has tried very hard. The Maryland DC Composting Council has worked hard to try to get grant programs passed for expanding composting, and that is really critical. And I will stop there because I think I'm at my time. There is a slide with contact information for me if anybody wants to reach out.
Thank you so much, Linda. Go ahead, Mike, and while we're having a bit of discussion, I'm going to reshare these slides, but go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Linda, thanks for the presentation. I just have I just have one clarifying question. I think you, in one of, I think the early slide, you said that you are not limiting, you don't want to limit the definition of compostable to ASTM standard. And I'm wondering, this is a non-standard, whether you're talking about the D6400 or 68. These are something that is acceptable. Why are you guys deviating from accepting that as your?
No, that's not what I meant to say, and I apologize if that's how it came across. Those are definitely criteria that we want. I think that, and Rhodes can probably go into this more, I think that that recommendation really came from the compostable packaging side of our task force, but we did not want it to be like material by material, that the EPR law would say, oh, well, we'll only allow acceptance of fiber. You know, we didn't want it to be limited that way.
No, I understand the material agnostic. So you're saying that you're adhering to non-standard. That's where I'm getting at, because otherwise you're going to create some equivocation and have people talk about or use it, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question.
My question is, are you saying that you're going to adhere, you're recommending adhering to non-ASTM standard for compostable? Is that what you're saying? Because I saw something in the slide that didn't say that. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, no, we are recommending that we follow ASTM standards for
Okay.
68.
Okay,
68
thank
and
you.
6400.
Maybe take a look at that slide and correct it so it doesn't come across differently.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. And I think there was something in the chat that I'm having a hard time keeping track. What do you mean look at other states for their language? Oh, Bradley. So yes, I don't have them right in front of me, but I know that Colorado has a specific cadence when they reopen the cover. Is it Colorado? Maybe Washington, when they reopen the covered materials list and they update it. And from what I could see in Maryland's language, I don't think that there's a specific updating date. And I think that that should not be left wide open. Oh, we'll just update when we think it's time. I think that it would be really good for the state to have a specific cadence for updating, and shorter rather than longer because of changes in material technology and field testing capabilities.
Go ahead, Chaz.
Thanks, Linda. That was a very good presentation. I'm a little curious about some just basic data about compostable packaging. How much nationally is currently produced, both tonnages, percentage of overall packages. Are there any products that are more likely to be found in compostable packages than others? What are compostable packages made of? There's a lot of really basic stuff that I hope we get covered today. And how is compostability defined?
Okay, so a lot of those questions are not core questions to composters. They're good questions for roads to answer, because I generally have relied on roads numbers because they're the ones doing the study of percentages of compostable packaging. So I know I've heard a number a year or two ago, but I would hesitate to put it out in case it's changed. So I'm going to defer on that question. In terms of specific material types, I mean, the one that I know I see in a lot of compostable materials coming from composters and discussed by composters is PLA. PLA seems to be a very successful and ubiquitous material in a lot of various bioplastics. So I don't know the percentages of it, and I know there are other substrates and materials that are out there, but that's the one that I have heard really positive feedback from composters who are accepting packaging.
And just a basic definition of compostability.
Yeah, it's based on the ASTM standards is the definition that we have always referred to.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so that might have been a good transitioning point into our next conversation, our next presentation. Thank you so much, Linda. I am not sure if you're able to stay on, but I think here is Linda's information. And thank you so much once again. I'm going to transition us now over to BPI's presentation with Rhodes.
Yes, thanks for having me. My name is Rhodes Yepsen. I'm Executive Director of BPI. If you can go to the next slide. For those of you who don't know BPI, we're North America's leading certifier of compostable products. We were formed back in 1999. And we work on not just certification, but also education and public policy to align the systems and supply chain needed to make compostable packaging successful. So as you can see here with our board of directors, that means we work with a variety of companies and organizations. So those making raw materials like biopolymers, but also paper and fiber products, the companies converting those raw materials into packaging, the brands using those items, including at restaurants, as well as food scrap haulers and composters, and academia, including Veteran Compost with an operation in Maryland. Next slide. So to Chaz's question, so what is compostability? I have a definition that's fairly high level there from an older USCC model labeling bill that we worked on back when there was a compostable plastics task force. It says capable of undergoing aerobic biological decomposition in a compost system such that the material becomes visually indistinguishable and breaks down into carbon dioxide, water, inorganic compounds, and biomass. So that's the broader definition, Chaz. I think in terms of what can meet that is where the ASTM standards come in. And a compostable claim really describes both an attribute, which is the performance based on the tests in an ASTM standard specification, where there are multiple tests and pass-fail criteria. It's also a claim that is an instruction, identifying which bin to place the item in. In this case, this is why certification is so important. And I've shown that a couple versions of the BPI certification mark, there are other certifiers as well. And the varieties of formats that we provide to increase the chances of using it on the finished product or package. So you can see an example of a produce sticker, another circle there for the top of a coffee pod, or longer format claims for packaging where we have disclaimers about the ability to break down or access to compost. In this way, the certification mark provides that single point of communication across that entire value chain, whether you're making a new material like a biopolymer or all the way through to the consumer or the composter. And if something needs to be updated or changed in an iterative way, which we do quite a bit, it again provides that single point of alignment. Next slide. So why does compostability matter? In the case of EPR or other packaging design, we see this at the intersection of food waste and packaging laws and goals and interest in society. Redesigning for compostability connects these two otherwise siloed issues of food waste and packaging, where you have the center of that Venn diagram for non-recyclable, non-reusable food-associated items. Next slide. Going back a few years ago with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, as they started to look at what is the circular economy, how do we identify the issues around plastic packaging in particular, they put together this nice infographic identifying that if you're looking at the number of items, over 50% of plastic packaging will need some type of fundamental redesign or innovation. And they describe the categories and why that may be. Now, not all of these will become compostable, to be clear, but the things that make these items in need of fundamental redesign and innovation and make them challenging for recyclability are all assets for compostability. So small format, there is no 2-inch by 2-inch screen typically that an item has to pass through in order to make it into a composting facility. A small item is okay. Multi-material, nature does the work of disassembling that. So you can have a multi-layer compostable package as long as it meets that ASTM standard and it shows that it will fully break down in the compost pile. Uncommon materials, that's the name of the game for compostable biomaterials. We're not talking about polyethylene. We're talking about fundamentally new materials that have been designed and tested to be consumed by microorganisms in the compost. Nutrient contaminated, so being food soiled, that just shows that the item has been designed appropriately for the system in which it will be used. Again, composters want food scraps and yard trimmings. The compostable product is a vehicle to boost participation, to reduce contamination. It is not the product you're looking for on its own like it is with recyclability. Next slide. So yeah, Linda already covered this. We partnered up with the US Composting Council back in 2021 as Oregon and Maine hit hot out of the gates with their EPR packaging laws. BPI realized, we had been involved in public policy for quite some time, but that we really needed to up our game, hire full-time policy staff, increase our contract lobbying, things like this to really make sure that we were ahead of the curve. Because as we looked around the world, no EPR packaging laws, except for Italy, were successfully applying the fees on compostable products to compost systems. And we saw this as a pretty big missed opportunity if we couldn't get ahead of that curve. So with the EPR principles and in heavy investment in our policy work, we were able to help correct that course so far in the US. So beyond Maryland, there are 4 other states that successfully included some aspects of these principles. Again, not 100% of them, but a couple of the ones that really stick out to me are ensuring fees on compostables fund the costs associated with composting these materials and educating the public, as Linda mentioned, defining compostability and requiring clear labeling and identification, providing representation from the compost and compostable products industry on the state advisory groups. Next slide. And as was mentioned already as well, Maryland is in a good spot, right? You are a state in which there is already a decent amount of compost access, with residential food scraps collection programs offered in several counties and drop-off programs available in several cities and counties. There also are food scrap collection services available in other areas around the state from businesses like Veteran Compost, Compost Crew, Go Green OC, and likely others. There's been a major boom of food scrap collection services around the country to help fill in the gaps and meet the needs and interests of businesses and residences as municipal programs catch up. Maryland also has some existing laws that can be leveraged, referenced, and updated over time to support EPR and compostables in EPR, noting that it is different from recycling, where the blue bin is just for recyclables, the compost bin is largely, again, for food scraps and yard trimmings, and the compostable products are a small percentage. So Maryland has a large food waste generators requirement to separate and divert food residuals from landfills and incinerators. This is not just to composting. It can go to anaerobic digestion as well. And there is an existing law around compostability claims, saying that an item cannot claim compostability unless it meets the ASTM standard specification. And this was passed several years ago to combat greenwashing and reduce contamination in compost. Next slide. A few things that we're seeing as we watch and participate in the regulatory development of EPR in Maryland. One is the advisory board. So while the law requires representation from organics recycling processors, where the concept in the law was that composting is a type of organics recycling, and it helped, I think, Maryland's law be relatively streamlined and simple compared to some of the very lengthy legislation that we saw in other states. I think one of the downsides of that was not being specific in terms of the advisory board itself, and noting that a stakeholder should be actively taking covered compostable materials to be able to properly represent the goals on the advisory board. And in this case, it's not that there is no composter in the state who has experience. There are several composting facilities in the state that take covered compostable materials. In terms of definitions of compostable, bioplastic, multi-material, as you go through that regulatory development process, we see the tendency to try to redefine this for compostability in the EPR law. And again, we would suggest keeping it very simple and harmonious and pointing back to the existing labeling laws and labeling requirements. And if an update needs to be done, updating that statute rather than having conflicting things where fingers are pointing to different regulations that could cause confusion and could lead to loopholes for products that are outside of the ASTM standards, making it in and introducing things like PFAS or persistent microplastics that would otherwise have been excluded. And then additional support for compost infrastructure and access. Again, while Maryland's compost access is further along than many other states around the US, EPR funding provides incentives for advancing the diversion of food waste by incentivizing and funding the diversion of associated food packaging and products. So there's a good synergy there, thinking again of that Venn diagram and something to be aware of. Next slide. I think that was it. Yeah, there's my contact information and a QR code if you want to see some other things about BPI.
Thank you, Rhodes. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, Rhodes, Scott the Fife, GPI here. On this, are you suggesting that? Well, let me back up. For organics and compostables, I mean, typically we don't see that covered in the same recycling bin, that EPR is curbside that it is handling, right? Have you looked and thought at all about where the compostables and organics recovery fits within the definitions. You know, curbside is defined as, you know, exactly how it is. Almost anything else is going to have to fall into alternative. Did you look at are the alternative collection regs as proposed and definitions going to meet that? Secondly, there is a lot of small format potentially compostables coming through the secondary glass stream, because the primary MRFs, the material's getting put in the recycling bin, and then it's going to get sorted out to the glass stream. That material is probably not, especially if it's small, because I noted the mention of small is okay in compostables. But the composting industry that I typically hear from, especially dialogue that we had in Colorado, really doesn't want the material that's coming out of the glass stream because there might be glass in it, even though there's a lot of small compostables in it as well. And so I ask about those two things.
Sure, I'll work in reverse because I might need to ask a clarifying question on the other one. So when I say small is okay, yeah, I'm definitely not meaning the secondary MRF materials mixed with glass fines. What I mean is when we think about the reason that those small format items are on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation infographic as challenging and needing fundamental redesign for recyclability is the general standard of a 2-inch by 2-inch size at a MRF to make it in the primary process. And so in a primary process at a composting facility, a small tea bag or coffee pod or produce sticker or condiment packet, or name your small item here, right? Doesn't need to pass that 2-inch by 2-inch minimum to be able to make it into a composting facility.
So it's a comment on the fact that with organics recycling, small is irrelevant like it is with glass, because the glass is made small anyhow.
Yes, and so if you have small format items that are going to be really challenging to redesign for recyclability or reuse, and they're food contaminated, right? The more buckets you hit in this, the bit more assets you have for redesign for compostability.
Okay.
For the other one, in terms of how the alternative definitions, I'm not sure I totally followed. I can look back into the regs. I'm not the key policy expert for all of our EPR states. That person is on leave right now. But yes, I don't think I saw anything that needed correction in Maryland's EPR law in terms of broad scale alternatives definitions. I think the ones that I mentioned on the other slide were the ones that stuck out to me, where I saw some crossover as the regulation tries to define multi-materials or biopolymers versus fiber, getting into that with definitions for compostable that could be streamlined by referencing the labeling law. But I'm not sure if I misunderstood.
Well, there's a nuance that we've been trying to deal with in the statute, in the regs, about how the material is to be collected. Any material. Yeah. Any material to be collected, and there's curbside, and then there's almost everything else, right? And so my understanding of most organics is, while there is some accessibility at curbside, even I'm not sure about the status of that in Maryland. We have it here in Virginia. I have an organics cart separate from my blue recycling bin and my waste bin.
Yeah,
I suspect that you need some sort of hybrid system really to manage most organics and compostability material streams in a given state.
Yeah, if you go back to the slide before that, yeah, I don't know if this was totally, exhaustive here, but yeah, that is what I was trying to show, Scott, is that unlike many states in the US, Maryland is further ahead. It's not universal. It's not as widespread as curbside recycling access today, but you do have several counties that have residential food scrap collection, many of which include compostable products already. So it's not perfect, but I think EPR is a perfect way to help broaden that access.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Ruth.
Scott, can I follow up? I want to make sure I understand what you were asking as far as alternative collection versus curbside collection. So the curbside list is supposed to be curbside for recyclability or compostability. So it's got both within the definition. And I don't think the intention was to combine both of those streams into one collection point, which will get sorted out of the MRF. I just want to clarify that that wasn't what you were implying here, to do
No.
one collection bin. Okay, thank you.
I'm not implying that they need to be integrated or commingled, but to collect at curb and then to also collect at drop off or things that are not curb implies a hybrid system that I think we've been struggling, because there's going to be different counties with different systems. And Shannon, I was more speaking to the difficulty of us trying to define curbside versus anything else that isn't curbside, including drop off as alternative. I think it fits for their material as well.
Yes, thank you very much for the clarification. And you're referring to the fact that there are potential some pieces and components that counties that have less infrastructure for curbside collection, as in like an actual mobile stop by every single person's home, versus the drop-off locations for more of the rural communities, as well as any transfer stations in which you as a county individual can do so if you chose and opted not to bring everything there. So thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and I think the drop-off programs can be operated by cities or counties. We're seeing around the US that this collection subscription services, a lot of those companies are now also broadening into offering, partnering with municipalities on drop-off programs for more rural areas. So yeah, happy to help point to some of those examples if that's helpful.
We do have one more question here from someone on the advisory council. They were asking, and I don't know if they're not able to come off mute. It was, what mechanisms do you see as most valuable for increasing collection of compostable packaging without contamination of otherwise recyclable packaging also in the system? And that came from Abigail Stein.
Yeah, so I think following the design principles, right? So in terms of contamination, avoiding contamination, clear labeling is one of that. Education is another, but then also criteria to focus on non-recyclable, non-reusable food contact packaging as the primary target. It's not to say that there couldn't be other items designed for compostability, especially common contaminants in a compost facility that are also not recyclable. But in general, we have found that municipal composting programs and business composting programs that follow those principles of well-labeled items that are associated with food that are not otherwise reusable or recyclable, and that have good education and signage, have extremely low contamination rates. So, some of the most famous examples are Seattle with less than 2% contamination in their residential composting program, Minneapolis with less than 1% contamination in their residential composting program, showing how possible this is. And then subscription services, again, that's a self-selecting community, but again, the contamination levels tend to be quite low in those programs. And I think that will also then have the value for the composter, but yeah, working in reverse of how you avoid contamination.
Chaz?
Yes.
Rhodes, very good presentation. Thank you. I'm wondering if you have data on the tonnage, the current tonnage of compostable packaging in this country and what products it primarily contains. In other words, what universe of materials are we dealing with here?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, we have been talking a lot about starting to try to collect that data in a more serious way. Right now, we have segmented data within the different silos. And I think part of the difficulty here is, trying to avoid double counting because it's not like with, glass or aluminum. We're talking oftentimes about very, compounds of biopolymers, multi-layer materials, items that could be recyclable in one context or that are compostable in another. In the case of a coated coffee cup, right, that is compostable, where a biopolymer lining could allow that item to claim recyclability if clean and dry, and compostable if food soiled, or a craft paper bag as well, molded fiber products, napkins, right? And so I think this has been one of the tricks and why we haven't invested a huge amount of time in it, but we definitely have been hearing this a lot and have been starting to try to find, how we can measure that in the best way, whether that is pure tonnage or percentage of the pie compared to the conventional counterpart. But no, I did drop a link in the chat. I think some of the more sound data that is publicly available, not one of these consultancy-led survey data, is the European bioplastics data that I put in the chat that looks at global bioplastics production capacity, both for bio-based, which could go into, because again, this is another nuance, right? Some are measuring bio-based plastics, which could go into things like bio-PET for durable or recyclable goods, or compostable biodegradable polymers. So their data is pretty good. It's not US specific, and it's not compostable specific, and it doesn't include paper and fiber. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with starting to figure out how we could track that better. EPR will also help with that because there will be a lot of reporting, right, in states. So we want to provide some data. We also know that as the states with EPR get into this, there's going to be massive amounts of data collected.
Mike, I think your hand was up first. Shannon, did you have something specifically on that topic?
I did. If you don't mind, Mike, I'm going to jump in real fast. Just a really quick question. So Rhodes, when BPI certifies the compostable packaging, do you have some sort of percentage, which is materials that are distributed in the United States are fiber-based versus multi-material, like which, and that on the certification, how does that actually get applied to the product of the packaging so that we can understand, I think alluding to what Chaz was asking, how much of that material, what's the process of certification, and therefore we'll kind of understand those entities that meet the requirements through BPI and how you kind of measure back and forth on which ones meet the criteria of compostability, obviously in order to get certified, but then can they just use your labeling in perpetuity, and how does that work exactly?
Okay, yes. So in terms of how they meet the criteria, that is the same for all products. They all have to meet, in our certification, they all have to meet ASTM D6400. There are some other ASTM standards you can add on top if that is beneficial to an organization or they're trying to meet some additional requirement, but ASTM D6400, all products have to meet that. The certification is valid for 3 years. So if you have not made any changes within that 3-year period, you must resubmit samples, conduct some additional testing at that 3-year mark. If changes happen in those 3 years, which sometimes they do, again, this is a pretty new industry, you have to document and resubmit your formulas and tests. Our certification scheme is public on our website. It goes into great detail. So the ASTM standards, they're great, but they're only a few pages, right? They provide a very high level overview of the requirements. A certification scheme like BPI's goes into greater depth of how you interpret and apply that. And additional criteria we put on top of the ASTM standards, things like PFAS prohibitions, carcinogenicity testing, reproductive toxin restrictions, things like that. In terms of, how we track things, again, to Chaz's question earlier, like we're not tracking volumes. We do have some reports, and I can send those to you in terms of the categories that we have certified. So all the products on we've really for years been tracking things at a fairly detailed level publicly for products. So instead of just, most certifiers just give the certificate that has been approved, which will say paperboard or bioplastic thermoform and things like this that don't really make sense to the consumer or a composter or a restaurant trying to source these. So for over a decade, BPI has required companies to share SKUs, stock keeping units, for every single item that wants to claim the certification, whether that's on the product, in the case of a consumer-facing finished item, or within the supply chain, right? A paperboard or a polymer compound. We need the specific grade, the specific thing linked in our database. Otherwise, it cannot claim compostability even on a sales and marketing sheet because it's so confusing to people, right? We know a lot of companies produce recyclable grades as well as compostable grades of materials, and we have a lot of specificity in there. So if you look at that, we have a counter at the top, right now, as of today, 52,429 individual items in the supply chain. Again, that's not finished products only, but that includes raw materials and partially converted paperboards and things, are covered by a certification. Yes, we have segmented that out. You can see the subcategories of agriculture, bags, packaging, food service, resin, components, molded fiber, and pet waste products for Canada only. And we, in our annual report, give some analyzation of, in the given year, the number of products that were certified in those categories. So we have it based on that, but it's not, we're not tracking volumes of sales yet today or tonnages, things like that. It was just something early on in BPI's growth that wasn't a top priority for us, right? We didn't want to get into the game that so many were in of tracking sales volumes and tonnages. Now that is important, but early on it wasn't really that important to us.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks. Hey, Rhodes, thanks for the presentation. My question really zeroes in on the references you've made multiple times on multi-layers. Recognizing that some multi-layers, use barrier materials in between that cannot be composted. In fact, in some cases, difficult to recycle. How do you use multi-layer in that general sense, knowing that there are some that it doesn't matter what you do, it cannot be composted?
Yes, so there are rules. Some of them are covered in the ASTM standards, and then some of them are in our certification scheme if you want more specifically how we would do it. So within the ASTM standards, there are limits for what has to be tested on an individual basis versus what has to be tested on the finished product. So in terms of the impact on a multi-layer material and ingredients and the ability for that final item to disintegrate safely in a timely manner in a composting facility, the finished structure always has to go through disintegration, that physical visual breakdown, so that it's not contaminating the compost. In terms of the raw materials, we also analyze those, and that is based on the formula disclosed. So there's no de minimis amount for disclosure. Every ingredient has to be disclosed to us, even if it's 1/10 or 100%. And there are rules in the ASTM D6400 standards. If you are, there are certain allowances for ingredients under 1%, not exceeding 5% in total, don't have to be tested separately. Ingredients between 1 and 10% always have to be tested separately. Those rules are changing. BPI voluntarily has reduced that total from 5 down to 3%, and we're trying to get that adopted in ASTM right now. I believe the ballot closed this week as we try to encourage stricter standards over time. And so those ingredients within a structure, again, whether it's multi-layer or other formats, think of a paper bag that has adhesive on the bottom, or the printing inks, right, and the polymer carrier in the ink. That may seem small, but a highly graphic packaging can have a lot of ink and carriers. And so for us, what we've done is, with the standards, help of the guidance of the standards, is said it doesn't matter whether you're talking about multi-layer or adhesive or an overlacquer over the ink or all these other things. What matters is the total amount of polymer and what has to be tested for biodegradability to make sure that we're not introducing persistent microplastics into the soil in the compost. So hopefully that helps. And then there are plant toxicity requirements, heavy metals requirements on those ingredients too.
No, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah. And yeah, I encourage you, if you want to be more specific and get really political or technical wonky about it, look at the certification scheme and ask me questions if you have follow-up.
Go ahead, Abigail.
Thank you. I think my connection is better now. Well, many thanks to both of the speakers today. I think you guys have given us a lot of really helpful information for thought and for consideration, as I think that, as was mentioned, compostable, we're kind of early on this in some ways, so far as, one of the first EPR programs to be contemplating this. And how we do it has the potential to be precedent setting elsewhere, and also has the potential to, really figure out new ground, for better or for worse. There's a chance of us, needing to learn and adapt. And so one of my questions related to that is, With the knowledge that the EU's PPWR is going to start adopting criteria and targets for their bio-based standards in 2027, or maybe it's by 2027. Do you see there being a, certain like particular areas where we should be considering more flexibility because things are still developing? As you said, this is more of a new field or a new industry. It's not truly new. Obviously, we've been composting for millennia, but in this kind of structured way, are there particular areas where having room for growth and room for learning would be most beneficial versus other areas where you think, it's pretty set, pretty clear? I mean, obviously, for paper, ASTM 6868 and 6400 are what our industries look to. But are there, with there being new types of coatings and things that are potentially or actively compostable, where do you see there needing to be room for change potentially?
Yeah, do you mean change in the criteria for compostable products, or change in the Maryland regulation more broadly, or just?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of in the context of Maryland, what can Maryland do to be able to adapt to opportunities?
Yeah, I think that Maryland, for the most part, the law for EPR and the regulation as it's being developed has enough flexibility to do that, compared to other states that I think have added in some complicating factors to their EPR law, and I understand why some of those states have put in really aggressive rates and dates and other requirements that go beyond just sort of the basic foundations of EPR. But I think that's where we see some challenges, right, in that innovation and ability to guide and encourage. I mean, I think yes. I think for the most part, Maryland's EPR law is well suited to that, which is, as long as you are, making sure that you have a keen eye towards how this intersects with other things happening in Maryland. Again, noting that for compostable packaging, it's not a bin just for the packaging like it is for a recycling bin, but that it must dovetail with other efforts to increase access for food scrap composting, and other efforts around packaging labeling, right, with this separate law. That's what we need, right? Is no one has the crystal ball. We know that a lot of material is still ending up in our landfills, and it's not just packaging, right? A lot of food in our landfills, a lot of packaging in our landfills. And what we see working with the supply chain around compostable products is that organizations thrive when you give clear criteria, when you provide forums to update those criteria in an iterative way to improve things over time. And so that has worked for us really well. BPI has seen a lot of growth over these last 10 to 15 years because we've created that forum for people along the value chain to align on criteria and thrive as their business model aligns in that supply. So that means, again, things like voluntary PFAS prohibitions, changing that maximum of 5% ingredients down to 3%, adding in more criteria for labeling specifications. So we're the first certifier for compostable products that requires on-product and on-package use of the certification mark. So you are ineligible to get certified unless you have a written exemption, unless you are actually labeling your product. And so things like this over time have allowed, sometimes constraining, right, by adding new criteria that cause some difficulty, but overall have allowed thriving and allowed more access to compost for receiving compostable products as we build trust downstream with municipalities, food scrap haulers, and composters. So I don't know if that totally gets at your question, but I think Maryland is in a good spot to set strict enough criteria, but that allow for that innovation to occur, so that the people making the packaging, using the packaging, receiving the packaging at the end of its life can guide it.
Chaz, you're up next.
Thanks. Rhodes, I believe you listed Colorado as one of the states that covers compostability. Is that correct? Since their program launches, I believe in June, how do you perceive what they've done so far in compostability, lessons that can be learned, strong points, weak points?
Yeah, I think that they're in a good spot. Their labeling law, came after Maryland's, their external compostable product labeling law. So I think, they have a little bit of an advantage there. The Colorado compostable product labeling law has some extra specificity around, product coloration, and has a easy reporting mechanism, which some people love and some people hate, how easy that is to report bad actors. And so I think that that's one aspect that is helping Colorado. I would say that in terms of residential access, I think they're a little further behind than Maryland. And yeah, we still have been providing feedback and comments in terms of, how eco-modulation will be used. And I think that there's some questions there. And I'd be happy to share, our written comments around Colorado that get into like some specifics with that, Chaz. Again, I'm not our policy expert at BPI. I sort of watch it as it's happening and provide some guidance. But generally, it seems like it's going fairly well. And I think that there are some things that we could help try to draw some parallels for Maryland if you'd like.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised at the moment. Thank you so much, Rhodes, and I'm going to now transition us over to our last speaker.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Birchfield. I'm going to represent the composter who is the end receiver of this. We can go to the next couple slides. Just real quick about Maryland Environmental Service. Of course, as you may know, we are a non-for-profit business. We provide environmental compliance to state and local governments and private sector. Next slide. We have over 1,000 projects in every county in the state of Maryland. So we are, 100 plus employees wide. And if it's environmental, we're into doing it. Next slide, please. I specifically run the Prince George's County operation for Prince George's County, Maryland. And this is one of the largest counties in the state of Maryland with 25 incorporated townships, with the largest curbside collection program at 185,000 plus homes. And in 2019, this facility did win the US Composting Council's Compost Manufacturer of the Year Award. And in 2013, the county themselves won the Organics Diversion Program Award of the Year. So we're trying to be on the precipice of doing the best for the environment in here in Prince George's County. Next slide. So compostable versus non-compostable, as what we're seeing down here, and I like to talk a lot about the photos you'll see in the slides as well. So, as we've heard from the other two speakers, non-compostable products add to our contamination stream, which also ends up adding to the waste stream at the end of the process. Certified compostable products help to ensure that cleaner product and the cleaner product for the end user. And then we've always had issues with greenwashing. It's really up to the consumer to figure that out. So if you look at the top photo there, that is one of our municipality collections in October just recently. Lots of pretty pumpkins, great compostable bags, good load. I had to dig back in the files on the bottom photo. So that is one of our first loads we received back in 2013 when we started seeing if we had food scraps availability in the state or in the county. And as you can see, it is far from being a perfect load at that. We ended up at the very beginning, we hand sorted that load in particular to see what sort of contamination and what compostable and what food scraps were actually in there. Not a lot of compostable products, a few green bags, as you can see in the photo, some food, but it was a lot of MSWs mixed in with the load. Next slide. So we have always touted and tried to inform folks on the ASTM D6400 certification from American Society of Testing Materials. It's one of the biggest ones that I always look for, along with BPI, but the top three I'll go over in short detail. You know, for ASTM, the 6400 certification, 90% or more of organic carbons should be converted to carbon dioxide within 180 days. Products must physically break down and into particles that pass through a 2 millimeter sieve within 84 days. And so that's something that we really want to see as for a product size for the material coming in. And as mentioned before, we're interested in the nitrogen source of food scraps, not necessarily the packaging. It makes for a good vessel to help get that material to us, not necessarily something that's, you know, highly impactful in the process itself. Next slide. Of course, BPI, you know, Mr. Rhodes just did a whole thing on that, so I appreciate everything he had to put into that. Biodegradable Products Institute, they aim to increase the stringency as described earlier. You know, looking at labeling is connected to only food scraps products, so it's not something you're going to see on recyclable products. It's not going to see on things that need to be disassembled. And they have also required that the labeling be on the packaging and the products. So that's a great thing. Helps the consumers in the grocery stores or even ordering online when they want to find the products that we accept as a composter. They can see those labels. They can see that BPI on the packaging and on the product itself. Next slide. Another one that's come up recently in the past few years is TUV, our Technical Inspection Association. They're a Austria company that specializes in quality environmental compliance. They offer various certifications. The ones that we look for include the OK Compost and OK Compost at Home labels. They have other ones for recycling, but those are specifically the two that we look for as composters when we let people know, say, hey, if you're looking for a compostable product and it has the TUV label, look for the ones that say OK Compost or OK Home. And they also meet the 90% biodegradation rate, same as the BPI and the ASTM D6400 certifications. Next slide. Big thing, lab testing versus field. So the products, as mentioned before, lab testing provides the inherent degradation and provides proof of that degradation. It's highly accurate, it's repeatable, and they can test individual portions of that product for its degradation complexity. Whereas sometimes in the field, we don't have those same things. So in the photos here, we have a compostable bag that is encompassing a biodegradable bag with a BioStar label, as you see on the inside. So there's two compostable bags, one wrapped inside the other with a paper product inside. And of course, the one below that is a 100% compostable product that we accept. I didn't get the label in the photo, but it's full of all the great stuff that you want to see as far as a composter. Next slide. So a lot of times what we see is you'll see, again, we'll get the right stuff that comes in. You know, local conditions, weather conditions may affect the composting process. Inconsistent pile makeup sometimes will change the rate of decomposition in the piles. If conditions are correct, it does give validity to the lab testing. So that's a good thing. Some of the things that we do have problems with as composters is when folks tie those compostable bags in knots, the knots sometimes pass all the way through our grinder process and into the material. And then as it starts to degrade, that knot opens up so that it doesn't get everything inside the knot. And we end up with what you see in the lower photo. And so what ends up happening is some of that material ends up going back into the process for a second time so we can get that degradation through our screened overs. Next slide. The big problem we've always had, greenwashing. Products that claim eco-friendly, it will say 100% natural, it has the leaves all over it. The top bag, I wish I had a closer photo on it. Underneath of where the little plant is, it says it degrades in 900 days. And that just won't work for us. Our process at minimum is in our windrows is about 8 months. And then under our covered aeration system, we're looking at, 8 to 9 weeks. So 900 days is just a skosh over what we want to see. But again, if you're an uninformed consumer, you're going to think that bag is reusable, recyclable, and biodegradable. It's all the wonderful things in the world. And unfortunately, it's just not true. And I've always taught that there is a difference between biodegradable and compostable. We look for the compostability product side of it. Biodegradable originally, was designed for landfill applications, but not necessarily breaking down in what we need it to be breaking down for. So the responsibility is, again, on the consumer to do their own research. I like to also tell customers and tourists when they come here that if you have a hard time finding that BPI logo or the TUV or the ASTM D6400 certification, and you go to that product's website, if you have to dig for it, it's probably your first red flag. Those companies are going to be proud to have those certifications, and they're going to be right out there as soon as you open the website up to see it, or it's right there on the packaging as BPI ones. Next slide. Again, greenwashing. So the two products here, one is BioStar bags made by EPI, top photo, and the lower one is BioStar made by Pitt Plastics. The Pitt Plastics BioStar bag is accepted at this facility, but the top one by EPI is not. The top one is biodegradable. We could not get it to break down, and I remember trying many times. What we used to do is to take a laundry bag, put the products in a laundry bag with some organics, and then put them in the piles, and then we would pull them out between each of the system phases and see how it would degrade. Most times that BPI bag went in looking the same way it came out. Again, the Pitt Plastic bag, the BioStar bag there is a great bag. It breaks down for us. The biggest thing what you see is you'll see the consumer will say, okay, well, they type in BioStar, it comes up, and the Pitt Plastics bag is a higher cost significantly than the EPI bag. And if I'm trying to save money, I'm going to get for the cheaper option. Unfortunately, the cheaper option in this case is not accepted at this facility. So it's more of one of those buyer bewares. Next slide. Again, cleaner in, cleaner out. So the more certified products that we're able to get and people are able to use, the better our end product will be, and the better that it is going to the market and back into the environment. Preventing greenwashing products from entering the organic stream reduces the contamination for us, and it decreases the amount of waste that the facility produces, which is, one of the key reasons because it exists. We want to make sure that we're having, the top of the spear, if you will, for composting and saving our landfill space. Next slide. So a quick conclusion. Testing certifying products are a must. We tell people do your own field testing and is highly encouraged. Your specific region of the globe is going to get different feedstocks. And so you're going to have different temperatures, different environmental impacts that may affect your composting process. And you may have a product that works here that might not work where you are. It's good to see that there's more stringency going out in the field to help us out on that. But, composters and clients and customers want to be aware of false claiming, greenwashing. And of course, education is always key. We love to see more education for the public and for the consumers. And I believe that's my last slide. Yep. And I apologize, I don't have any contact information. I forgot to put it on.
We can definitely share. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Steve, good presentation. Just for my edification, what's the current capacity at the Prince George's County site?
So for food scraps, we are able to receive 32,500 tons of food scraps, and we're just over 100,000 tons of total capacity.
So your available capacity, what's your available capacity?
For food scraps, we're about 60% capacity. So we have about another 40 to go before we're 100% full for food.
Got it. Thanks, sir.
Yep.
Any other questions for Stephen?
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Okay. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Oh, I see Rhodes put something in the chat. Okay, that's some information that Rhodes put in the chat. Go ahead, Martha.
Yes. Hi, Steve. Nice to see you. The EPR for packaging program is all for consumer-facing packaging and materials, as I understand it. So what percentage of the food scraps that you're getting are from curbside as opposed to from businesses? I'm not really clear if composting for businesses is even, I don't understand how that fits with the bill. I don't know if you're the one that can answer that, but I'm just wondering what percentage is from curbside.
Yeah, I don't have that data.
those-
Yeah, I don't have that data in front of me right at the moment, but you have my email. Feel free to reach out and we can see what we can do.
And just to clarify, Martha, are you referring to the fact of residential versus commercial?
Right,
Because
that's what I mean.
and I just, yeah, sorry, I just want to make sure I clarify that the a business can haul, right? So those materials can be hauled by a business, not necessarily a county always operates their own trucks for hauling. So just wanted to clarify on that one piece.
I'm sorry, I don't think it's clear for me yet.
Sure. So to clarify, there are residential collection or residential drop off, and then there are commercial, there's institutional, and there's industrial, different types of production of those materials. And at many of the composting facilities around the state, they receive a variety of those materials. As far as who is hauling it, it may be by a a county-run hauling truck, or it could be by a private hauler that collects from residential. So there's a difference between the two types of haulers that come through, not just the loads that they represent. Is that correct, Steve,
Yeah.
in that interpretation? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. In Prince George's County, we have contracted haulers that collect on behalf of the county the residential curbside. But I'm not really clear how maybe I'm thinking about the wrong dimension, but I'm not really clear on how the bill would apply to those haulers that are also taking stuff from restaurants, or haulers that have both a commercial hauling and contracts with the county, or how they would figure out reimbursement rates or whatever.
Yeah, to Martha, so as far as the covered services, covered materials, and covered entities, those three looping definitions, there will be a percent that would be reimbursable, just like not all of the food is going to be reimbursed. It's the percentage of those covered materials, which would be just the compostable products, if that's helpful as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Angie, I saw that your hand was up for 1 second. Just want to make sure you didn't have anything to add.
No, all I was going to say is we do have a way, like the Prince George's County site does have a way that we differentiate the data of commercial versus residential, even though the haulers may all kind of be intertwined in some way, shape, or form. We do have a way that we collect that data and save that data and have that data. So I believe most facilities should be able to do that and do that currently.
And what percentage of that is at the Prince George's facility then would be residential?
We can provide that data for you.
Okay.
I can get with the county on that, but like I said, it's something that we do have available, just not, offhand right this second.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Stephen. The next thing we're going to do is open it up for discussion amongst the advisory council. We've already had a lot of great discussion. If anyone has follow-up questions for any of the presenters who are still on, please feel free to ask. And otherwise, we'll just open it up so that you all can discuss anything that was covered in the presentations or that was not covered in the presentations. Go ahead, Chaz.
Yeah, I'm just frustrated by the lack of basic data about the amount of compostable packaging, what this material it is, how we're trying to regulate it. We don't seem to have good data on what it is. Hopefully we will get some good results out of Colorado when that program starts in June. But I have no problem whatsoever with the idea of compostable packaging, but with all the other packages out there, we have data. We have a rough idea of what we're dealing with. I just feel like a lot of this, we're kind of operating in the dark.
Because are you referring to the registration that will be occurring? And Pete, maybe that's what you were going to allude to in that comment.
Partially, just do we know what we're going after?
Maybe I can, Peter Hargreaves, CA. Thanks, Jazz. I think we have a general sense. We have some reporting in some of the jurisdictions that's starting to come in Colorado. We've got some data from some of the Canadian provinces. So it's under 1% of the overall materials that are supplied. It's obviously going to vary a little bit depending on the state. So what materials are included in each state, but it's a smaller amount of the overall packaging that's generated that would be considered certified compostable. And again, those states are measuring just certified compostable packaging and products that are included in. So we've got a general idea of what it would represent. I think the challenge is certainly one that is a measurement question as we look at compost facilities and their ability to measure not only front end of what's coming in through their doors, but also back end of what's getting processed. And I think that will be one of the challenges because it is a minority of materials. How does the pro identify how much material a facility like Stevens would be taking in? And how much is actually getting processed. And so that is an area that I think we are working on to try to address. And I think it's a challenge in the sense of how much money do you want to spend on audits to get an actual representative sample versus how much money do you want to try to make sure is going back into the process to recycle those materials. And so that will be, I think, one of the challenges. And I think we are working through some of those details in Colorado as we move forward. And we're thinking through as we have a number of new states that include slight differences in requirements for compostables in Maryland, Minnesota, and Washington.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Rhodes.
Yeah, I think I understand the challenge there with not a lot of data. The data that exists shows that it's still small. I think what's important here as we think about the purpose of EPR, right? And there are multiple purposes, providing clear guidelines, providing stable funding sources. But I think a big aspect of this as a society is to provide incentives for redesign for better recovery of materials. I think that number of compostable items may be below 1% today, but likely will grow over time with the appropriate criteria to that question earlier of how do we incentivize that in the right way. In terms of, Peter, how to track it on the other side, again, we don't have a lot of examples. I do think in Italy, they have a separate PRO for compostables. And my understanding in talking to the Italian Composting Council and the Italian PRO over the years is that, yes, a decent portion of the money goes to public education and to waste audits at the composting facility, both to determine the percentage of covered materials coming in, but also impacts of contamination and ability to help fund contamination mitigation. So if I'm happy, some of that information is publicly available. The PRO is called BioRepack in Italy. But yeah, if you're looking for additional information, I'm happy to make connections with the Italian PRO.
I'll hold the floor for a couple more minutes here just to see if anyone has any other thoughts. Yeah, go ahead, Angie.
I will say that if anybody has any specific questions that they want to ask regarding, the Prince George's County compost facility, if we could just gather them all in one, lump, that would be great. And then what we can do is I can get with the county, and we can, dish out the information of what's necessary. So if that's okay with everybody else, that would be great. Because we would love to obviously, answer any questions necessary, or the county obviously wants to be helpful.
Great, thank you, Angie. Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, I'll just say that perhaps one of the follow-ups we can get is to ask that question of the various different compost entities, certified compost operators in the state, to determine if they've gotten any existing data, because we do have existing infrastructure. It's been around for quite a while, and I think that we might be able to be a little bit more forthcoming with some of that data by asking some of our composters, compared to Colorado, which does not have as widespread access comparatively to the state of Maryland. So that might be one of the benefits to having so much existing infrastructure and such an aggressive council to provide all this data for us from I don't know if Linda's still on here, but the DCMD Compost Council may have quite a bit of that data as well. So.
Yeah, I'm still here, and no, I don't think that we've been collecting it as a council. I can't say that we have, so it would be interesting if that could be put together for a state, because it's not easily available.
And I'll just note, I know that we've talked a lot about residential before, but a covered entity, as defined in the environmental article, does include not only single family, multifamily, but a public and non-public kindergarten, elementary school, or secondary school, a child care center, and a public building owner operated by the state or local government. And one of the things I wanted to point out in that regard is that many schools have switched over to compostable after the EPS ban for food packaging. So that might generate quite a bit of packaging that is hauled from schools in this, compostable packaging that is hauled from schools on this activity.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, Eileen.
Shannon, just following up on what you just said, though, for the purposes, though, of the EPR bill, we're not limited in the commercial sector to just what you had just defined. You were referring to the organics regulation, correct?
No, I'm going to share my screen just for a quick second, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that you all can see what I see on mine. But this is under 925.01, and it indicates that the covered entity, as again, this is circular definition. So it's covered entity, covered material, and covered services. I think those are the three. And here, this covered entity includes all of these, listed right here. And so the covered materials for this is the one I was indicating. We may be seeing that that the compostable packaging may be a larger percentage in these locations, specifically because that is a place in which food is served on compostable packaging in many of the locations around the state already because of the EPS ban. If that helps to clarify.
Yeah, I'm not sure if, but in terms of our EPR work, we're looking at the packaging products and all these different materials covering the gamut, single family, multifamily, commercial sector generated. Right?
So in order for, and this is where I wanted, and Pete, I saw you nodding your head, so that's why I'm just going to potentially point back to you. So in order for there to be a reimbursement for a covered service, it has to be for a covered material and a covered entity. And we haven't gone down that road very much in the reimbursement discussions. But that is planned for the upcoming months, where we plan to talk more about the reimbursement strategies as far as what could be reimbursed and to whom and for what.
Okay.
It does not mean that the materials coming into the state, it's intended for those materials that are to be distributed to those entities, that it would be a coverage charge. Pete, do you want to help kind of sort it out with Wileen, what maybe her question might be?
Yeah, I think the pro is required to provide, as you mentioned, reimbursement only for covered services to covered entities. So any entities outside of that scope that Shannon put up on the screen, the pro is not required. So we could not provide reimbursement to materials captured at other facilities. So we're limited in our scope of what we can provide to that. And obviously as well, the definition of packaging is limited to non-commercial personal use as well. So there's some limits that have been inputted into the legislation that limit what's captured.
And I think it does not, the way in which the regulations are supportive of the law are intended with the alternative collection. That's why we started to make sure we had a definition on that, was to ensure and description of that potential opportunity for a producer, because there will be these eco-modulated fees, which we'll talk about in the future, that a producer of those materials may provide for alternative collection. It does not necessarily have to relate specifically to that covered entity. They could just operate an alternative collection under an individual producer responsibility plan. Abigail?
I guess potentially two questions here. First is, thank you for the reminder of what a covered entity is. There's a whole lot that are potentially under these categories that do not now have compost systems. What is the vision for when they, for a multifamily residence, for example, if they were to decide to start doing composting as a part of the Maryland EPR, or under the Maryland EPR program, what is the vision for how the PRO, or what would be the elements that the PRO would be paying to, or the program would be paying to help set up? Would they be providing the bins? Would they be providing the education? Would they be providing all of the collection? Like, how much per covered entity would potentially be a part of the making it happen for covered entities that would choose? And if a covered entity does not choose, would there be a penalty for that? Do they have to if they are considered a covered entity, or is it an optional thing? Or is it if you choose to do it, it's free, or you might even get some sort of financial incentive for it? What kind of, going beyond the how much compost exists, this is such a bigger, it doesn't exist at all now scale. How would that work? And then I do have another question, but it is totally different and still but still under the category of compost. So
yeah. So some of that will bubble up with the pro plan. And I think that's what Pete was probably going to respond to. But there are other requirements as far as what can be collected and where that is under a solid waste master plan by each of the counties on certain collection points. So, for example, if a county is suggesting that is that if a multifamily residence would like to have this type of collection exist on their property, they may need to have an approval both either by municipality, if they're in a municipality, or by the county, and include that information in the solid waste master plan. And so again, this is we are not running forward with this. We just want to start to talk about this conversation and where this might be approved. I do not believe there is a mandate anywhere within here that says one of these covered entities must have this type of collection. I didn't see that anywhere within any of the legislation. It's just more of, if you are providing this, you have the ability to be reimbursed for, and the activities are covered within the definitions of covered services. And Pete, I don't know if you wanted to explain a little more on that.
Yeah, I think like, so a lot of this, Abigail, needs to be developed as part of the program plan. These are things that we need to think through. And obviously compostables are a little bit different in the sense of a recycling system is entirely set up for recyclable materials. A compostable system is set up mainly to deal with source separated organics, leaf and yard waste, food waste, those types of materials. The idea is to, leverage those systems for compostables. But, if the pro was to fund entirely new systems on the back of only compostables, and if they're only representing a very small percent of that stream, you would potentially put a price on those compostables that would overshadow any other material, and make it, from a business perspective, not worthwhile to invest into that type of packaging. So I don't think that's what you want to do. So this is where I think, as part of the plan, we need to start thinking through how to make this work, how to put the right incentives in place in the system so that we are allowing the system to grow, but also not completely pricing out one part of the packaging system.
And Pete, just to clarify, in order for the producer it is written within the legislation that said that the fee for the product cannot be increased to support the program itself. So I want to make sure that we make sure we clarify that piece of it, because I don't know if that's what you were implying here with the compostable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Abigail, you said you had another question?
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to the idea of like every single apartment building in the city of Baltimore starting to do composting, and the program has to scale up the fees on everything in order to pay for that. That just sort of, I don't know, that's kind of boggles the mind, but I am not the PRO. So we'll see what the plan looks like. So my other question is, and recognizing that perhaps this is uniquely something that applies to paper and fiber-based packaging, but for paper and fiber, no, I guess it doesn't, because we were talking about bioplastics too. For materials that have the potential to be simultaneously recyclable and compostable, but maybe one is optimal in one situation and one is optimal in another. Is there a vision for how the categorization or the structure all is going to be contemplated? Like situations where, I mean, we've got this language where we've got paper-based packaging, then we've got paper products, then we've got paper products that are not packaging but are in commercial, but that has to be not what's included in the other parts. And so adding on, when it's compostable and the collection process, I just want to, maybe I'm just flagging because this is part of the general discussion, how complicated this has the potential to be, because we are doing research now, and as are other entities, on food residue on paper, and when that switches over to a recovered fiber, a paper mill would no longer accept would not be able to process it in order to turn it into a new recycled product, versus when it would be considered like optimal for composting, and sort of the process for making those decisions has to sort of be, it touches the hauler, it touches the sorting facility, it touches the facility that receives the material in order to turn it into a new thing, either whether that's composted material or a new recycled product. And so I just want to flag how complex a number of entities sort of like have to opine potentially on when it's compost versus when it's recyclable. So I just wanted to maybe throw that out there. And I know that for some of my members, they might have different guidance for a MRF that is sending them material, depending on what it is they are intending to make even. So I just want to throw that out there, that this is not a simple aspect that we're getting into.
Angie?
Hi, I guess Abigail, just, and this might give you some clarity on it, of just generally thinking, like speaking within a MRF and someone that has a compost facility. If, let's say, your cardboard box, pizza box, for example, is soiled with grease, it would no longer be accepted at the MRF. It is now a compostable product. So that's generally kind of the line that I would say, and Eileen, I think she can speak on this too, that that's kind of the line that everybody kind of treads on regarding paper products that may be soiled with organics or things of that nature. You know, if there's grease on it, then it would be considered more of it would be better off in the compostable going to an organics facility than being into a bale and going to a mill, you know, to be pulped down. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit of clarity of how that's kind of the line that a lot of the facilities use generally in the Maryland area. Am I right, Eileen, on that? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Does that help at all, Abigail?
Well, it does and it doesn't, because I think then you've got to think through, okay, is it going to then be transported from a MRF to the compost facility instead of going to a landfill? Like, is this an additional step that a MRF might be taking to sort of, you know, because usually you would try to send it to the compost facility or the MRF essentially immediately, as opposed to it needing to do an additional stop and have additional transportation involved in its sort of destinations. And the other thing I'll just flag, and this is a quick little pitch, one of my members did a collaboration with a major pizza company a number of years ago to determine how many paper mills will accept pizza boxes for recycling with grease having touched it. And you'd be surprised by just how much food residue can be present on a pizza box before it would not be acceptable by most paper mills, including one that would be in the region where it would be received from a Maryland facility. And I'm happy to share that information, but I also know that you guys are making business decisions based on, you know, maximizing your ability to sell the fiber. And so, but I'm happy to share information on that if needed.
So Abigail, I will say that it's all about education. Education at the forefront of educating your residents. Generally, compostable materials do not come into a MRF. It's all about educating your residents. I know a lot of municipalities educate the residents on, hey, if it is soiled with organics, put it in your compost if you have that program. So kind of that's, again, it's all, in my mind, it's all about education on the forefront of the residents so they know what to do with it, so it does not get to a MRF that then has to be, you know, transported or whatever to an organics facility. So it's all about education on the forefront and getting the residents to do the proper thing, put it in the proper bin. Peter, I know you had your hand raised.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, a great conversation. I mean, I think, you know, some of these types of things I think are conversations that will need to be happening as the program plan is developed. Where should those materials, how do you ensure that you're getting highest and best use? I know that the pizza box dilemma is one that has been ongoing for years. And I think it's a good conversation to be had as we look forward as to what stream should it be in. How are we getting highest and best use out of materials? The pro will be back-ending the cost as we move forward, and that cost will go up as a percentage over the years. So I think these are really good conversations to be had, and where those materials are best supported. And then from a fee perspective, the pro needs to understand how to assess fees to producers. And so pizza boxes usually aren't certified compostable. So there's going to be that question of where are they being directed to go, and what costs are those producers paying for as part of either the recycling or the composting system, or potentially if those producers are required to pay for both, how do we do that in a way that ensures fairness? So there's a bunch of questions around this one that I think need a deeper dive.
Okay, thank you all for great conversation. I am noting that we have about 3 minutes left before we need to open things up for public comment. We do have one slide to share that was provided by Upstream as a follow-up to our last conversation. So I'm going to put that up here.
And we'll post these documents on our website so that you all can review them. Sorry for the delay on this.
Absolutely, yes. With the last couple of minutes, I'm not sure, Mel or Shannon, if there's anything on this slide that either of you would like to share about, and then I'll turn it over to public comment.
Mel, I see that you're on. I know it's kind of early for you out west, but I don't know if there's something that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, no.
And John, just so you know, these will be available online so that we can share them in much more greater detail in the future.
Yeah, no, I'll just, good morning, everyone. I'm on the West Coast, so early morning for me, but I just want to thank Shannon and Sarah for sharing these with the advisory board. The one document is just Upstream's recommendations on how to deal with reuse and refill under the Maryland law. And then the other one is a recent fact sheet that I shared at the last advisory council meeting that just kind of helps explain a little bit more about what actually qualifies as reuse and refill under the scope of EPR. I know we had a little bit of discussion about that at that previous meeting, so I would really encourage everyone to just take a look at that, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want to talk about anything reuse and refill related. We're always happy to share our thoughts and speak with anyone who's interested. So thank you all.
Great, thanks so much, Mel. All right, I'm going to hand it over now, and I saw that there was a comment in the chat about making it larger. Just want to reiterate what Shannon said. We will share these slides so that you can look through this more thoroughly. I'm going to actually, yes, so our next meeting date is scheduled currently for April 21st. That will be about the curbside recyclable compostable list. After that, we're planning on holding a meeting on May 28th that will be focused on program planning, and all of those meetings will be from 9 to 11 a.m. So please put those on your calendars as a hold. We'll be sending out a meeting invitation very shortly. And then I'm just going to throw it over to, actually, I think what we'll do is we'll open it up for public comment right now. And then if anybody's interested, we just have a quick update about the general permit for composting facilities after. But I'm going to now open it up for public comment.
And if this is the first time you've joined an advisory council meeting, if you're not on the advisory council board, public comment is open time for you to present any information you'd like to share. It is your voice during this period of time. So just use the raise hand function, which is very close to the upside down telephone, red bubble. There are 3 dots, and right to the left of that is the hand. That's what you would use to raise your hand.
I'm going to hold this space for a bit, also move on to our last slide here. Here are some resources, especially if you're joining from the public. If you're new, please be aware that there's more information posted on our website, and here are some other resources as well.
Sarah, if you wouldn't mind going back one more slide, towards the front of the deck. I just wanted to point out for anybody who is interested in presenting on the curbside recyclable compostable list that is defined in I-2508 as far as what the list may contain, please let us know by April 1st so that we can coordinate the presentation similarly to the way that we have done today, so that you all have the opportunity to have allocated time to share about your specific information. Thank you.
If no one has public comments at the moment, I might turn it over to you, Shannon, to talk about the general composting permit. And if anyone joins late or thinks of a question as Shannon is going through that, please raise your hand and I will transition right over to you.
Yeah, just to point out that the general permit for composting facilities in Maryland is open for, or sorry, is going to be available for public comment. You can attend virtually or in person. If you'd like to review the draft permit, the link is embedded in here. The public meeting will be held on March 24th from 5 to 7:30. Again, you can attend it's a hybrid meeting, so you can attend in person or virtually. We ask if you are going to attend the meeting either way to register ahead of time. When this PDF goes live on our website, you can click that link, but it's all over our social media with MDE. And so please feel free to check out those various different social channels to see the active draft permit and its language. We hope that you have, if you have any questions on that general permit, to reach out and ask those questions. Seeing no additional hands, Sarah, I think we'll turn over to the advisory council chairs for any final parting words.
I'm good. I think, yeah, this was a great conversation. I think we got a lot done here. I think, it kind of opened the eyes and given a lot of education to the group. So thank you guys.
I echo that, Angie, and thanks to all of you. This has been a very informative session, but thanks to the speakers as well for taking the time, especially the person in the West Coast. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your week.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll conclude the meeting. So thank you so much for attending. We look forward to seeing you soon.